Okay, welcome into the Week 10 update. Thanks everybody for listening. Real quick, before we get started with the whip around, just want to congratulate the Hemp Hogs as the first team to clinch a playoff spot this year. With 4 to play, they've got a 5-game lead on the third place team, so they can't finish any lower than second in the division. So a playoff spot clinch for them. Everything else is still pretty wide open. Kathy's close to clinching a spot, especially with points. But then there's a few teams down there at the bottom that have really got some work to do. And then over in the Hallis, actually a pretty tight race there. So, but again, nobody eliminated yet. But there are some teams that do have their work cut out for them. But congratulations to Pat. All right, and speaking of Pat, as we go into the whip around, he takes over the points lead from Kathy with a huge, he had a big 180 points this week and takes over the points lead in at 1,449. Sorry, what I'm going to do with the whip around with the trade deadline is at this week, all the way up to the kickoff of the Monday night game. So, I know trade. I've for years and years, and I love doing trades, and I think it's one of the funnest parts of fantasy football. Like being kind of your GM or whatever, and that's what it's all about. And I know it just sometimes you just don't feel like you want to trade or need a trade, or sometimes you don't want to put the effort in or whatever. But anyway, what I'm going to do for the whip around today is just kind of go through each team, kind of give their strengths, and maybe kind of almost like what I would do in their situation. So, but we'll start with the Hemp Hogs. Like I said, taking over the points race lead. So their strength of their roster to me is wide receiver, and with Olave, Chase. I won't go into the whole roster, but the strength to me is wide receiver, and they've been getting serviceable running back work, but could use that another horse in the running back room there. So I might move like an Olave or Devontae Smith maybe for a solid, low end RB1, or just somebody that's going to give you that you're a little more comfortable putting in over like Rachaad White or even Ramondre. Really, he's been kind of inconsistent, but that's the kind of the direction I would go. Use that strength of that wide receiver room to your advantage. All right, that'll take us over to Men in Tight Pants in at 1421. Again, knocked from the points race lead after a several week run there, but again, not out of that. And then their strength obviously is wide receiver. Their strength is running back. They need a wide receiver, and actually got 3 really, with McCaffrey, Etienne, and Montgomery, 3 running backs that anybody would like to have on their roster. So, and then kind of not really that hammer at wide receiver. So I would take that swing at a stud wide receiver with using one of those 3. Obviously, if you're using McCaffrey, you're going to get more. I would not trade McCaffrey, but if I was using Etienne or Montgomery, I'd be taking a swing at like a solid, top 10 type wide receiver that you can kind of plug in that wide receiver 1 role there. Again, using the strength of your team to improve other areas. Then we'll head over to Ingrown Hairs, up to number 3 in the points race. one thing I forgot to mention there, Pat and Kathy have kind of pulled away from everybody else, and it's kind of a two-team race in the points race, as we go there. But on the I've already made a few trades actually. Swung the one earlier in the year to pick up DeAndre Swift and Brian Robinson, and then a few weeks ago sent Bijan to Tony for CeeDee Lamb, and that one has really turned out good. And it's kind of balanced the roster, especially if Cup can get him and Stafford can get on the same page. So kind of got that Gibbs kind of and Swift do a running back, strong balance there, but could really use some help, depth at any of those positions. So maybe what I would do is move one of them, like a Ford or Brian Robinson to try to get some again either like a solid third wide receiver or maybe even some additional running back depth. Use some of the I'm sorry, I messed that up, but I would use either some of the kind of wide receiver twos that I got to get some running back depth, or trade, one of my lower end run or my like Ford or Brian Robinson for some wide receiver depth. But really kind of balance and not really, I don't, unless not really looking to make a trade. I've already made two. So that's the long way of saying that, I guess. Then we'll head over to Rasa Dogs in at 1,323 points. Another kind of balanced roster. Some decent running backs, some decent wide receiver. Obviously, Tyreek Hill leading that wide receiver room. He would be like the only guy that I would call off limits. But interesting thing about this roster, you got Goff and Mahomes. And I would maybe try to find a team that's kind of desperate or has had up and down quarterback or inconsistent play at quarterback, and maybe move one of those to either, obviously it's, Mahomes is going to bring you more, but you'd be good with either one starting the rest of the year. So move one of them for maybe some running back depth, get to pair with Breece Hall or another wide receiver to pair with Debo and Tyreek Hill. But so that's kind of where you've got the quarterback is where you kind of got the extra player. So that might be what I would do there. So. Okay, and that brings us to White Bronco in at 1,282 points. Kind of on a little skid here. And, I'm sorry. I skipped. My bad. Next in fifth place in the points race is Fargan Ice Holes in at 1321. And, man, I'm really sorry. Bear with me here. All right. Fargan High Souls in fifth place in the points race with 1,321 points. And the thing about their roster I was kind of looking at is it's starter heavy. Starter heavy. Like all the strength is in the starting lineup, and the bench is kind of, so that's kind of you kind of, whenever I'm in a situation like in the years past, whenever I've been in a situation like that where, one injury is just going to wipe out my team, that's when I kind of make that big, swing for the fences kind of move where, you'll take maybe my best player like a Diggs or, even a Josh Allen or maybe a Mark Andrews even, and kind of balance out your roster a little bit. Maybe, do that one for two or three or two players for three or one, whatever. Just take and yeah, man, you could stand pat and just go with what got you there. And like I said, it's a solid starting roster, but just not a lot of depth. And if you get a big injury down the stretch, it could derail, the whole season. So that's the kind of roster I would maybe take, like I said, take that big kind of home run swing and try to get some pieces to kind of balance out the roster a little bit would be the move I would make there. All right, now we can go to White Bronco in at 1,282 points. And they've got some solid wide receiver depth. Obviously A.J. Brown, Keenan Allen, all the way down the list. Marquise Brown, Jackson Smith-Njigba, McLaurin, any guys anybody would like to have, but don't. And what is two big disappointments for them this season has been Trevor Lawrence, and Pollard. So what I would do would be take some of that solid wide receiver depth and, go looking for maybe a QB that you're more comfortable with in Lawrence, or maybe, a RB2 that can kind of, put Pollard on the bench for a while, see if he gets things going, and you got somebody to plug in there without, you could move Pollard into flex if you trade some of those receivers and stuff like that. So, again, using your strength of your team to bolster the where you need help. And then Houday 23 is in 7th place with 1,253 points. Again, a pretty balanced roster. Some solid running back options, solid wide receiver options. Kelce at tight end. It's happened a couple times in past years where Kelce's kind of moved late and kind of swung the balance of power in the league. But, you could get a lot back for Kelce. But not necessarily that I would make that move. What I would probably do is take some of the running back depth, Jones, Henry, Javonte Williams. You got, there was one other one I was looking at. Maybe that was it. But yeah, take one of those guys and kind of maybe try to add a low end wide receiver one to kind of pair with really kind of like what you were hoping what Higgins was going to be when you drafted him. A guy that. I don't think you're gonna, with the running backs you're trading, you're not gonna be able to get Tyreek Hill, obviously, but use one of those running backs and kind of get a more solid wide receiver is the direction I would go. All right, that brings us to the Blue Blobs, in with 1,211 points, on a modest 2-game winning streak, led by C.J. Stroud there. And Blue Blobs are pretty strong at running back. You got, with Mixon, Eckler, Jaylen Warren, Alvin Kamara, you got some nice pieces there. So almost but the problem with all year has been, Davante Adams never really kind of was the wide receiver one you were hoping when you drafted it. So I might, it's late in the year, kind of desperation time. You might take that big swing and trade Eckler for a solid wide receiver one and see if that kind of, then you just move Mixon in and Warren. Between Mixon, Warren, and Kamara, you still got two good running back starters, and then maybe you get that wide receiver one to kind of bring everything together there, especially with Stroud getting it done at QB. And then that'll take us to your mama with in at 1,190. Obviously, the big thing for them is if Jefferson comes back from injury, that's almost like making a trade in and of itself. You drop him into your wide receiver one spot, where he should have been all year. But outside of that, to kind of trade the roster up, I would maybe go take a Cook. You're going to need outside of Jefferson being hurt. There's been some disappointment with Watson and kind of Wilson. London's been inconsistent or hurt, and you got some wide receiver depth there with Hunt and kind of Charbonnet's coming around, and then McBride at tight end. I might maybe take a Cooks and a McBride and package them for a solid running back one, or maybe kind of like I was talking before, that kind of wide receiver 1A, a lower end wide receiver one to pair with Jefferson once he comes back. Kind of heading down the stretch there. And then last but not least, we'll head over to TD Twisters in at 1,182 points. Really weird year for them. I mean, look, if I'm looking at this, these wide, it's a strong wide receiver room. Um, so, maybe take that like an Amon Ra or package two of your wide receivers and go for like a top 10 running back to kind of, it's just apparent that Barkley's everything, can't do it all he's doing it all for the Giants, but he's the only thing they got. So he's just not getting it done. Taylor, I can't figure out what's going on with him. So maybe take a couple of those wide receivers or one of the higher end, like a Metcalf or whatever, and try to get that solid running back one, to kind of, I don't know, not replace Barkley or Taylor. You can't even imagine taking it, but you need more consistency out of that position. So that's kind of, and really, really the depth at wide receiver is where, what makes that possible. So I don't know. So just kind of, I don't know. That's how I just kind of took a look at each roster, and that's what kind of put myself in, like, when I had rosters like that in the past, like what I did with them and what direction I went. And you never know what's going to happen. And I mean, we might not gonna get any more trades. We might get a lot. Who knows? But just something to me. That's kind of, like I said, what's fun about it. Fantasy football, and just something to talk about. So as far as game of the week, we had a bunch of blowouts this week, so nothing really stands out as game of the week. Probably the only game that really had any sort of drama at all was between RB and Tony, where Tony had Allen and Diggs and Judy going Monday night, but it was so far they obviously didn't have. The three didn't do enough to get Tony even back in it, but that, I was trying to dig up something for game of the week, and that's about all I could come up with. They're just, like I said, kind of a lot of blowouts this week. But so 4 games to go, and like I said, Pat's the only one so far that's clinched one. So everybody hang in there and have fun and good luck.